I still remember that night like it never ended. The kind of night that sinks its claws into you and refuses to let go. I was only a year into the job, still learning the rhythms of working nights. The silence, the boredom, the way the smallest sound on the radio could feel like a jolt of electricity running down your spine. Most nights out there were quiet, too quiet sometimes. You'd sit in the cruiser with the hum of the heater and the glow of the dashboard lights, watching empty roads stretch into nothing. That was Highway 16 for you, long, straight, and empty. A road that didn't seem to go anywhere but still carried a history heavy enough to choke you. Folks around here had stories about that stretch. People who vanished. Cars found abandoned on the shoulder. Travelers who swore they saw someone walking along the side, only to blink and find no one there. I never put much weight into that stuff. Not back then. I was still green, still trying to be the kind of cop who only trusted hard facts, reports, things you could prove on paper. But the longer I worked nights, the more I understood why the older guys kept quiet about some calls. It was just past midnight when the radio cracked alive. Unit 12, you copy? I grabbed the mic. This is 12, go ahead. There was a pause, longer than usual. Dispatchers don't normally hesitate. They're sharp, clipped, efficient. But this time, there was something in the silence that made me sit up straighter. Finally, her voice came through. We've got a call about a possible missing person. Last seen walking along Highway 16 near mile marker 48. Young woman, hitchhiking. Her voice had this tremor in it, like she was trying to sound steady but couldn't quite manage it. And the words, they dragged like she was choosing them carefully. I wrote the details down on my notepad, trying to ignore the way my hand felt heavier than usual. Caller's name? I asked. Another pause. Anonymous. Male voice. Hung up before we could get a trace. I frowned. Description on the girl? Early 20s. Long hair, white jacket. That's all we've got. Her voice cracked just slightly on that last part. Then she cleared her throat as if she'd said too much. I tried to shake it off. Probably just a spooked motorist. Somebody saw a hitchhiker and decided to phone it in. Still, the unease in her tone clung to me. Dispatchers don't scare easy. They hear everything. Car wrecks, domestic fights, gunshots over the phone. But something about this one. It had her unsettled. And by the time I put the cruiser in gear and pulled out onto the highway, I realized it had unsettled me too. The road stretched out in front of me, black and endless. My headlights carved out a tunnel of light, the trees on either side bending in close like they wanted to listen. I kept glancing at the shoulder, half expecting to see her right away. A girl in white waiting with her thumb out, but the miles slid by and there was nothing. Just the low moan of wind against the car and the occasional flash of a reflector post catching my lights. At mile marker 46, I radioed back. 12 to base. No sign yet. There was silence. Then the dispatcher answered, her voice hushed, almost like she was talking to herself. Copy that. Keep looking, I hesitated. You all right back there? A beat too long. Yes, fine, just keep me updated. Her tone was wrong. I'd spoken to her 100 times before. She was one of the steady ones. But tonight, her voice had an edge to it, a thinness, like she was holding her breath. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe it was just the lateness of the hour, the fatigue settling into both of us. Still, I felt my knuckles tighten on the wheel. By mile marker 48, I slowed down. The shoulder was wide there, gravel crunching under the tires as I eased over. I killed the siren, rolled down the window, and listened. The night air was cold, sharper than it had been earlier. The kind of cold that seeps into your lungs and makes every breath feel heavier. I leaned out, flashlight in hand, sweeping it across the ditch and into the tree line. Nothing, just weeds swaying, shadows shifting with the wind. I clicked the mic. Base, this is 12, I'm at 48. Negative contact! The reply came back too fast, like she'd been waiting with her finger on the button. Copy, can you check the tree line? I frowned. That and the call details? A long silence. Then, no, just check it. Her voice was low, almost pleading. I stepped out of the cruiser, gravel crunching under my boots. The flashlight beam cut across the ditch, lighting up the tangled weeds and brush. I pushed into the tree line, each step sinking into soft earth. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No crickets, no owls, Just the sound of my own breathing and the faint crackle of static from the radio clipped to my shoulder. I don't know how long I searched. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10, but something in my gut told me I wasn't supposed to find anything. Like the woods were swallowing up the space around me, closing in tighter with every step. Finally, I turned back. My cruiser sat there on the shoulder, headlights blazing, a little island of light in the darkness. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Climbing back into the car, I grabbed the mic. Nothing in the woods. Probably just a false call. There was no response. "Base, you copy." Static hissed back at me. Then faintly, her voice, "She's still out there." I froze. "Say again?" But the line went dead. I sat there, radio in hand, staring out at the empty road. The night pressed against the windows, heavier now, like it was listening. My stomach twisted with something I couldn't name. She's still out there. I knew the dispatcher's voice well enough to tell when she was rattled. But that hadn't sounded like her. Not exactly. It was her voice, yes. But the cadence was off. The tone stretched thin in a way that made my skin crawl. I sat in that car for a long time, just listening to the static, waiting for her to come back on the line. But she didn't. Not for the rest of the shift. And even now, years later, I can still hear her words echoing in my head. Not as a warning, not as advice, but as a certainty. She's still out there. I barely slept after that shift. The radio call wouldn't leave my head. The dispatcher never explained what happened, never admitted to saying those words. When I asked her the next morning, she looked at me like I'd lost it. Said she'd only given me the initial report and nothing else. But I knew what I heard. She's still out there. Those words carried into the next night, and the one after that. They sat in the back of my skull like a splinter I couldn't pull free. A week later, we finally got a lead. A trucker called in, said he'd picked up a young woman on Highway 16. Said she matched the description. Early 20s, long hair, white jacket. The same girl. I was the one dispatched to meet him. He wanted to talk face to face, not over the phone. We set it up at a diner just off the interstate, the kind that never closes. The kind that smells like coffee that's been burning in the pot since the morning rush. When I walked in, I spotted him right away. Big guy, mid-50s, denim jacket, ball cap pulled low. He was nursing a cup of coffee, his hands wrapped around it like it was the only thing keeping him steady. I slid into the booth across from him. "You the one who called in?" He nodded without looking at me. His eyes stayed on the coffee, the steam curling up into his face. "Tell me what happened," I said. His voice was low, gravelly. "Picked her up around mile marker 48, late at night. She was just standing there, thumb out like people still do. I don't usually stop, but she looked cold. And young." He finally looked up at me, and I saw how bloodshot his eyes were. He hadn't been sleeping either. "What did she say to you?" I asked. "Not much," he muttered. "Said she was trying to get to the next town. Said she'd been walking for hours. But she didn't look tired." That's what stuck with me. "She didn't look tired at all." I leaned back, studying him. "What do you mean?" "She was clean. Too clean. Clothes spotless. White jacket, not a speck of dirt on it. Shoes didn't even look scuffed. Like she hadn't been walking anywhere. That didn't sit right. I jotted it down, pretending it was just another detail. "Where did you drop her?" His hand trembled against the coffee cup. "That's the thing. I didn't." I waited, letting the silence push him to keep talking. He licked his lips. "1 minute she was sitting in the passenger seat staring straight ahead. Quiet, not even moving. Then I glanced at the mirror to change lanes. When I looked back, she was gone." "Gone?" I repeated. He nodded quickly. Door never opened. I'd have heard it. Seatbelt was still buckled. "Just gone." I stared at him, trying to keep my face steady. "You're saying she vanished?" "I know how it sounds," he muttered. "But I'm not crazy. I've been driving 30 years. I've seen things on the road, sure, but nothing like that. Nothing." I let the silence stretch between us. The hum of the diner filled the space. The clink of plates, the faint sizzle from the kitchen. Normal sounds, grounding sounds, but none of it helped. There was something about him that didn't line up. Not just his story, but the way he told it. His eyes darted too much. His hands wouldn't stay still, like he was afraid of more than just sounding crazy. "What time was this?" I asked. He hesitated. "Couple nights back?" "Midnight, maybe 1, I frowned. "Couple nights? You said you picked her up at 48. That was the night of the call." His face went blank. For a second, I thought he didn't understand me. Then he blinked fast, his mouth working without sound. "Yeah, that's right. Same night." I felt a chill run up my spine. His hesitation hadn't been confusion. It had been calculation. "What truck do you drive?" I asked. "Peterbilt. Blue cab." "You still have the log for that night?" Another pause. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, sure. Just need to dig it up." I nodded slowly, but my gut was twisting. Something was wrong here. We talked a little longer, but the details kept slipping. First he said she was quiet, then later he mentioned her humming. First he said she had long hair, then he said shoulder length. Small things, but enough to raise alarms. When I finally stood to leave, he grabbed my wrist. His hand was ice cold. "You believe me, right?" he asked. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, desperate. I pulled free. "I believe you picked her up. The rest, we'll see." That was all I said. But inside, I didn't believe him. Not fully, not the way he wanted me to. I filed the report, checked what I could. His truck logs didn't match his story. The times were off, the mileage didn't add up. But what unsettled me more was this. His cab had been cleaned. Too clean. Like someone had gone through and wiped everything down. No fingerprints but his. No trace of anyone else. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been in that seat beside him. That girl in the white jacket. Sitting silent, watching the road. The older guys at the station told me to drop it. Said we get calls like this, stories like this every so often. People swear they pick up hitchhikers who vanish. They call them phantoms of the highway. They treat it like folklore, like campfire talk. But this wasn't folklore. This was a man who looked me in the eye and told me he saw her. This was a report that matched the call I got. This was a dispatcher whose voice cracked when she said, "She's still out there." And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something that made my blood run cold. The trucker hadn't called because she vanished. He'd called because he wanted someone else to know he picked her up. Like he was shifting the story onto me, onto the record. Like he needed it written down somewhere. Proof that she'd been in his cab. Maybe because if he didn't, she'd come back. I never saw him again after that. His route changed, or he stopped driving through here. But sometimes, when I drive past mile marker 48 on a night shift, I catch myself glancing at the shoulder, and every now and then, I swear I see the glow of a cigarette ember in the dark, like someone standing just inside the tree line, waiting. And I wonder if she's looking for another ride, or if she's still sitting in that passenger seat right now, staring straight ahead, waiting for him to look away. Years have passed since those calls. I've worked hundreds of shifts since then. Pulled over speeding cars, responded to fights, stood over wrecks that still wake me at night. Time has a way of piling things up on you, but there are some nights you never shake off. For me, Highway 16 never let go. I avoided that stretch whenever I could. If my route assignment came up with mile marker 48 on it, I'd swap with another officer, or I'd circle a longer way around. I told myself it was just coincidence, that I was too tired or too busy. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was afraid of the silence there, afraid of the memory. Even off duty, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The girl in the white jacket. Sometimes I'd dream about headlights catching her figure on the shoulder, her arm outstretched, thumb raised. Other times, it wasn't a dream. I'd be driving home late, windows fogging up, and I'd see her in my mind, just ahead, waiting. But I never actually saw her again. Not for years. Not until last winter. It was a bitter cold night. The kind where the frost clings hard to the glass and your breath feels heavier just walking from the cruiser to the door. I'd been on the job long enough by then to be considered one of the older guys. Funny how that happens without you noticing. I was headed back along the highway after clearing a call. The road was dead quiet. No cars, no trucks, just the endless white lines flicking by. And as I came up near mile marker 48, I felt that old pressure return. The weight in the chest, the crawl of unease along the skin. I told myself to keep going, just pass it, like always. But then I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder, exactly where the first call had placed her. Same white jacket, same long hair, same stillness. Not waving this time, just staring at the passing traffic. Only there wasn't any traffic, just me. The sight of her froze me. It wasn't the shock of a hitchhiker, it was the stillness of time itself. Like nothing had changed. Like no years had passed at all. I slowed down without thinking, headlights washing over her. My throat went dry. Every part of me screamed to keep driving, to lock the doors and never look back. But my hands didn't listen. They turned the wheel, guided me to the shoulder. I rolled down the window just enough. My voice came out rough, cracking. "You all right, miss?" She turned her head toward me, slowly, too slowly, and when her face caught the light, my stomach dropped. She hadn't aged a day. Her skin was smooth, her eyes dark, her hair lifting slightly in the cold wind. Exactly as she'd been described years before. Exactly as the trucker had sworn. "Do you need a ride?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't answer, just raised her arm, thumb out, like she had all those years ago. I should have left, should have hit the gas and never looked back. But there's something about seeing someone out there, alone on the road, that breaks you. Even when you know it's wrong, even when every nerve in your body screams danger. "All right," I muttered. "Hop in." She opened the door and slid inside. Quiet, smooth, without a sound. She buckled herself in like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Then she turned her face back to the road, and for a moment it was exactly as the truck driver had described. She didn't look at me. She didn't move. She just sat there, staring ahead, her hands resting on her lap. The cab filled with the smell of something faint, damp earth maybe, or something older. I started driving, keeping my eyes on the road, pretending I wasn't aware of every small detail. The way her hair barely shifted, even when the heater blew. The way her breath didn't fog the glass. Finally, I forced myself to speak. "Where you headed?" Her lips parted, and in a voice barely more than a whisper, she said, "Home." That was it. Just one word. "Where's home?" I asked. Silence. I drove on, mile after mile, her presence thick beside me. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. I tried the radio, just for some noise, but all that came through was static. At one point, I risked a glance at her, and I swear, she was already staring at me. Her eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, like looking into a well at night. I jerked my gaze back to the road, hands tightening on the wheel. When I passed mile marker 52, I couldn't take it anymore. I slowed the car and pulled to the side. My voice cracked when I spoke. "This is as far as I go." She turned her head slowly again, watching me. Then, without a word, she unbuckled. The door opened. She stepped out into the night. I sat frozen, my knuckles white on the wheel, watching her figure retreat into the darkness. She didn't wait, didn't turn, didn't even look back. Just walked toward the tree line until the night swallowed her. I sat there for what felt like hours. But when I finally pulled away, the seat beside me, it was damp. The faint imprint of someone sitting there pressed into the fabric. I never filed a report. I never told anyone. What could I say? That the missing girl had come back, unchanged. A ghost-riding shotgun? They'd laugh, or worse, they'd pull me from the job. But sometimes, when I'm back on night shifts, I hear it again. The static of the radio, faint under the dispatcher's voice. A crackle that almost sounds like words. And in it, buried deep, I hear her whisper, Still out here. Not gone. Not resting. Just waiting. And I know one night soon someone else will see her on the shoulder. Someone else will slow down. Someone else will roll down their window and ask if she needs help, and she'll climb inside, buckle her seatbelt, and stare straight ahead. And the road will remember. It was just another long night. The kind where time slows down and every second feels stretched. I was halfway through my shift when the call came over. Unit 12, possible disturbance at the Red Pine Motel. Guest reporting noise in room 6. At first, I almost laughed. The Red Pine was one of those half-dead roadside places. 10 rooms, flickering sign, vending machine that ate your quarters and gave you nothing back. Nobody stayed there unless they were desperate. And room 6? That was the one room nobody rented out anymore. I knew because the owner, an old man named Frank, had told me himself. He said the floorboards had rotted out and the wiring was bad. Too dangerous, he'd muttered, shaking his head. Locked it up years ago. I keep the key myself. So when dispatch said there was noise coming from room 6, my stomach tightened. I pulled into the cracked parking lot. The neon sign buzzed above me, letters half burned out so it only read, "Re-Pi Nay." The place looked empty, except for 2 cars parked near the far end. The air was colder than it should have been. Sharp, dry, biting at my face as I stepped out of the cruiser. The motel stretched in a crooked line, doors painted the same peeling blue, numbers stenciled in faded black. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked past each one, counting down. Room 4. Room 5. Then, room 6. The door looked like all the others, but there was something off. The paint peeled more like it had been clawed at, and the handle, it was polished, like it had been touched often recently. I stood there listening, and sure enough I heard it. Movement. A faint thud, like footsteps. Slow, uneven. Then, a dragging sound. Something heavy sliding across the floor. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. I knocked. "Sheriff's Department. Anyone in there?" The sound stopped. Dead silence. I knocked again, harder. This room isn't supposed to be occupied. "Open up." Still nothing. I tried the knob. Locked. I stood there for a moment, debating. Could have been kids sneaking in. Could have been nothing. But the weight in my chest told me different. I headed back to the office. Frank was behind the counter, hunched over a small TV that barely had reception. He jumped when he saw me. "Room 6, I said. "Somebody's in there." His face drained. "Impossible. Nobody's got that key but me?" "Well, someone's making noise in there." He fumbled in his drawer, hands shaking, until he pulled out a brass key on a faded tag that read 6. He handed it to me like it weighed 100 pounds. "I'll come with you," he muttered, though I could tell he didn't want to. We walked back together, the wind cutting colder now, like the night had shifted against us. When we stopped at the door, Frank's breathing was uneven, shallow. "You sure about this?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just slid the key in and turned it. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. The smell hit first. Damp, mold, something sour underneath, like old food or worse. I swept my flashlight inside, beam cutting through the darkness. The room looked abandoned. Wallpaper peeling, carpet stained. Bed stripped bare except for a sagging mattress. A single chair in the corner. Dust thick on everything. But the dust was broken. Tracks cut across the carpet. Footprints leading from the door to the window and back again. Over and over. Frank's voice was thin. "No one's supposed to be in here." I stepped in, the floor groaning under my boots. The air was colder here, heavier, like it clung to me. My light followed the tracks until it caught on something on the nightstand. A motel key. Brass, just like the one Frank had given me. Same number stamped into the tag. 6, but the one in my hand was still on the ring. My heart started pounding. I turned to ask Frank if he saw it too, but he was already backing out, shaking his head, mumbling under his breath. I was alone in the room. I crouched to look at the footprints more closely. They weren't right. Too shallow in some places, too deep in others, like the weight kept changing. Like whoever or whatever was pacing here wasn't solid. The dragging sound came again, but this time it wasn't faint. It was in the room. I whipped the flashlight toward the corner. The chair. It was pressed tight against the wall when I'd first seen it. Now it was pulled a foot out. Not much, but enough. I swallowed hard, pulse hammering in my ears. "Sheriff's Department," I said again, voice cracking. "If someone's in here, come out." The silence that followed was worse than any answer. The air grew colder still. My breath came out in a white cloud. The key on the nightstand rattled just slightly as if something had brushed past it. That was enough for me. I stepped back, out into the hall, and pulled the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the key. Frank was already halfway across the lot, heading back to his office without a word. I followed, needing the sound of my boots on gravel just to remind myself I was still solid, still real. When we got inside, he locked the office door and pulled the blinds down. He wouldn't look at me. "What the hell was that?" I asked. He shook his head. "I told you. That room isn't rented out anymore. Why not?" His eyes flicked up at me then, pale and tired. "Because people keep checking out of it, without ever checking in." I didn't understand what he meant, not fully, but the way his voice cracked, the way his hands trembled, I knew he wasn't lying. I left the motel not long after, but the memory of that cold air, those shifting footprints, that rattling key, it followed me. And I kept thinking about the chair, the way it had moved, like someone had been sitting there all along watching me. I didn't sleep well that night. My mind kept circling back to the smell in that room, the cold air, the footprints that shouldn't have been there. I kept seeing that chair in the corner. Empty, but not really empty. Like the shape of someone still lingered there, watching. The next morning, I stopped by the station to file my report. It felt strange typing it out. How do you put into words that the air itself felt wrong? I left it clinical. Noise complaint. Motel owner confirmed no occupant. Room checked, no contact. That was it. But something about the whole thing stuck under my skin. So a few days later, when the motel owner called me back, I wasn't surprised. His voice was unsteady over the line. "You need to come down here." "Another disturbance?" I asked. "No," he whispered. "Just come." When I got there, Frank was pale, eyes darting to every shadow. He didn't even greet me, just led me straight into the back office. The place smelled like cigarettes and dust. There was an old monitor on the counter, hooked up to a set of security cameras. Grainy footage played in black and white. Frank jabbed a finger at the screen. Watch. The timestamp read the night I'd been there. The outside camera showed me pulling into the lot. Then it switched to the hallway feed. There I was, standing outside room 6, knocking. I leaned closer. I saw myself speak into the door. Saw my hand reach for the knob. Then Frank appeared in the frame, handing me the key. Together we opened the door. I stepped inside. The picture was fuzzy, but clear enough. I never came back out. I blinked, staring hard at the screen. "Wait, that's not right." "You were with me. You saw me leave." Frank's hand shook as he dragged on a cigarette. "I thought I did." "No, you did. We walked back to your office. We locked the door. My voice cracked. I remember it, but the tape showed otherwise. The door to room 6 opened just once, closed, and stayed closed. Frank rewound it. Played it again. Same thing. The longer I watched, the more wrong it felt. It wasn't just that I didn't leave. It was that after I went inside, the shadows near the window shifted, just slightly, like something else was moving in there. I stepped back, shaking my head. "This isn't real. Your camera glitched. He almost laughed, but it came out broken. "Son, that system's older than you. It doesn't glitch. It records what's there. I left not long after. My chest was tight, my hands cold on the steering wheel. I told myself it was a mistake. A trick of old footage. Nothing more. But I couldn't shake the thought. If the tape was right, then what had happened after I stepped into that room? And who was it that left the room with Frank? The memory of walking out, of hearing my own boots crunch on gravel, it felt solid, real. But if it wasn't me, then what the hell was it? That question started to eat at me. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself driving past the motel more than once, slowing down just enough to see room 6, curtains drawn. Door closed, like it was waiting. I didn't go back in, not yet. But the thought never left me. One night I woke to the sound of keys rattling, not in the house but in my head, like that brass tag with the faded 6 was swinging from an invisible hook. My dream had been of the chair again. Only this time, someone sat in it. I couldn't see their face, but I knew they were smiling. I started keeping the radio on at night just to drown out the silence. But even then, I swore I could hear something underneath the music. A dragging sound, the scrape of a chair. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I went back to see Frank. He looked worse than before. Hollow eyes, trembling hands. He didn't bother pretending this was normal. "You've seen it too, haven't you?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Just pulled open a drawer and set something on the counter. Another brass key. Number 6. My stomach turned. "You told me you only had one." "I did," he whispered. "But it keeps coming back. Every time I throw it away, it's there again the next morning. Like the room wants it close. I didn't touch it. Just stared at it, heart hammering." "What happened there?" I asked. "What's in that room?" Frank's eyes flicked toward the hallway, even though we were nowhere near it. His voice was barely a breath. "Some doors don't lead back out." That was all he'd say. He begged me not to ask again. I could see it in him. Whatever truth he knew, it had been rotting inside him for years. I left with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. The motel wasn't just some forgotten stop on the highway. Room 6 was a trap, a place that let you walk in but not out. And yet, I had walked out, or thought I had, which meant something else had walked out in my place. The thought followed me everywhere, in the silence between calls, in the rearview mirror of my cruiser, in the way strangers' faces sometimes looked too familiar, like they were wearing a memory of me. I started to wonder if I was even myself anymore. I'd catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror, and for a split second, I'd swear it was off. My mouth moving just a fraction slower than it should, my eyes staring back too directly, like the person in the glass wasn't following me, but waiting for me to slip. It's been years since that night, but I can still hear the sound of that chair scraping the floor. Still smell the mold and dust. And every now and then when I dream, I see myself standing at that motel door, key in hand. I turn the lock, step inside, and this time I don't come back out. It was close to 3 in the morning when the call came in. That hour where the night feels heaviest, when even the radio goes quiet. I'd been parked at a turnout off the highway sipping burnt gas station coffee trying to keep myself awake. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker. "Unit 12, report of a suspicious male, standing beneath the old overpass by County Road. Caller says he hasn't moved in 20 minutes. I frowned, rubbing my eyes. That overpass hadn't been used in years. Just a crumbling stretch of concrete where the new bypass had made it useless. I'd driven past it countless times. It was the kind of place kids tagged with spray paint, or where the homeless tried to sleep out of the rain. But at 3 in the morning, middle of nowhere, that was different. I keyed the mic. Unit 12 en route. The road out there was empty, just black asphalt cutting through dark fields. My headlights stretched far ahead, but the world outside was swallowed in shadow. No other cars, no signs of life. Just the hum of the engine and that steady yellow line pulling me toward the overpass. As I got closer, I slowed down. Even before I saw it, I felt something. That tight pull in my gut. The sense that I was driving toward something I didn't want to see. The overpass appeared out of the dark, massive concrete pillars rising up on either side of the road. The kind of man-made thing that should have felt solid, but in that moment looked skeletal, like bones sticking out of the earth. My headlights swept across the underside of it, lighting up the stained cement walls, and there he was, a figure. Standing dead center beneath the bridge, perfectly still, I coasted to a stop, cruiser idling, lights still on him. He didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, a black shape in the glare, his features blurred by shadow. I sat there for a moment, my hand resting on the radio. Something about him was off. Most people, when a cop car rolls up, they flinch, turn, at least look at you. But he just stood like I wasn't even there. Finally, I got out, boots crunching gravel. The night air was cold, damp. The smell of wet concrete hit me as I stepped under the bridge. My flashlight cut across the pillars, catching old graffiti, rust stains, empty beer cans scattered around. "Sir?" My voice echoed strangely under there. Too loud, bouncing back at me. He didn't answer. I got closer, beam fixed on him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket that blended with the shadows. His face was tilted down, hidden, hands at his sides. "Sir, you can't be here," I called again. "This isn't a safe place to stand." No movement. I could hear water dripping somewhere, slow and steady, like a clock ticking in the silence. The hair on my arms was standing up. I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. "I need you to show me your hands." Step toward me. Nothing. I was only a few feet away now. Close enough that my light should have caught his face, but it didn't. It was like the beam slid off, refusing to land. The shadows clung to him no matter how I angled the flashlight. My chest tightened. I don't scare easy, but something about this was wrong. My training screamed at me. People don't just stand there like statues. They don't hide their faces like that, not unless they mean trouble. I reached for the radio clipped to my shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've got a male subject under the county overpass. Non-responsive. A burst of static. Then silence. I pressed it again. "Dispatch, copy?" Nothing. I turned, glanced back at my cruiser. Just a few steps away, but it suddenly looked too far. The figure still hadn't moved. I licked my lips, tasted the metallic tang of adrenaline. "All right," I said, more to myself than him. "We're gonna do this the hard way." I reached for my cuffs, took another step closer. That's when I realized I couldn't hear him breathing. You don't think about that until it's gone. No shuffle of boots, no sound of lungs, no life. Just that drip, drip, drip of water in the dark. And then, as I got close enough to almost touch him, I saw it. The shadow he cast on the concrete. It didn't match him. It was stretched long. Too long, bending in the wrong direction. While my own shadow fell behind me, his curled forward, reaching toward my feet like a stain spreading on the floor. I froze. My skin went cold. The man lifted his head. For the first time, I thought I saw his face, but it wasn't clear. Just pale, blurred like a smear on glass. The edges of him wavered like heat rising off asphalt. I stumbled back, hand on my gun. "Stop! Don't move!" But he didn't come closer. He just stood there, tilting his head like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, slowly, so slowly, he lifted one hand and pointed down the road. I turned instinctively, following his gesture. My flashlight beam swung across the concrete. Empty, nothing there. When I looked back, he was gone, not walked away. Not hidden, just gone. I backed toward my cruiser, heart slamming against my ribs. The spot where he'd stood was empty, but the shadow on the ground was still there. It pulsed, faintly, like it was breathing. Then, as my light hit it, it thinned, stretched, and melted into the cracks of the pavement until there was nothing left. I didn't wait around. I dove into my cruiser, slammed the door, and floored it out of there. My hands shook the whole way back, the radio still dead, just static hissing at me. When I finally pulled into the station lot, the signal came back all at once. Dispatch's voice crackled through, calm as ever. "Unit 12, status check." I stared at the mic for a long moment before answering. My voice sounded hollow in my own ears. "Unit 12. Clear. I didn't mention the shadow. Didn't mention the way it moved or how he vanished. I just wrote up another bare bones report. Suspicious male. No contact. Subject gone on arrival, but I didn't forget. I couldn't. Because every time I drive past that overpass now, I feel it. The weight of eyes on me. The way the shadows gather too thick beneath the concrete. And sometimes if I glance in the rearview mirror, I see him still standing there. Still waiting. I told myself I wasn't going back. After that night under the bridge, I swore I was done with it. Whatever I saw, whatever it wasn't police business anymore. I filed my report, locked it away, and tried to move on. But the thing about night shift is, you have too much time to think. Long stretches of empty roads. Static on the radio. That quiet hum that leaves space for your thoughts to circle back to the things you want to forget. And no matter how much I tried to push it out of my mind, that overpass kept creeping back in. The way the shadow had stretched wrong. The way his face never quite came into focus, and the worst part, the way he pointed, like he wanted me to follow. 3 weeks later, the call came again. Different dispatcher, same words. Suspicious person under the old county road overpass. Caller reports subject not moving. My throat went dry as I listened. I should have let someone else take it, but I didn't. I keyed the mic before I could stop myself. Unit 12 en route. The drive felt longer this time. My stomach knotted tighter with every mile. The night was heavy with clouds, the kind that swallowed the stars, pressing down on everything, and there was a smell in the air. Damp, metallic. Like rain was close, though the sky hadn't opened yet. When I reached the overpass, I slowed. My high beams swept across the concrete, the pillars stained with graffiti. Empty. At least, that's what I thought at first. Then I saw them. Footprints. Dark. Wet shapes on the dry pavement right where the light cut across the road. They looked fresh, glistening. Bare feet, long strides, leading from the middle of the asphalt toward the shadow under the bridge. I pulled over, heart pounding, and stepped out. The smell of rain was stronger here, sharp in the back of my throat, though the sky above was dry. I clicked on my flashlight, aiming it at the prints. The longer I looked, the less they seemed like footprints. They were the right shape, sure, but the proportions were off. Too narrow at the heels. Toes too long, almost like fingers pressed into the road instead of toes. The prints led straight under the overpass, and I knew what I'd find if I followed them. Still, I walked. The concrete swallowed the sound of my boots, turning each step into an echo. I kept the beam fixed on the ground, following that wet trail. My breath came shallow. I tried not to think about how there shouldn't be any water to leave tracks like this. The road was bone dry everywhere else. Halfway in, I stopped. The smell hit me harder, thick, like wet soil after a storm. But the air was still. No rain, no wind. Just that scent filling my lungs, clinging to my skin. And then I heard it. My name, soft, whispered. I spun, light jerking across the pillars, searching. Empty. The sound hadn't come from in front of me or behind me. It had come from above. I tilted the flashlight upward, beam shaking as it lit the underside of the bridge. The concrete glistened, wet in places where it should have been dry. Dark streaks ran like veins across the ceiling, dripping here and there onto the ground. Drip, drip. I swallowed hard. Who's there? Silence. Then again, my name. Drawn out this time, stretched into something almost unrecognizable. The sound crawled across the concrete, as if it wasn't a voice at all, but the echo of one. I backed up a step, fighting the urge to run. Every instinct told me to get the hell out, but my legs felt heavy, pulled toward the shadows. The footprints ended just ahead. I raised the light, and there it was again. A figure, not standing this time, but crouched near one of the pillars, head bowed low, arms resting on its knees. The beam flicked across it, but like before, it refused to come clear. My eyes tried to focus, but the outline shifted, blurring at the edges. And the smell of rain. Stronger now, suffocating. Sir? My voice broke. The figure twitched. Just slightly, then it lifted its head. I don't know what I expected. A face, maybe. Eyes. Something human. But there was nothing. Just darkness where the features should have been. A void that pulled at me, deeper the longer I stared. The whisper came again, closer, like it was inside my ear this time. My name! I stumbled back, light flaring across the concrete. My boot landed in one of the wet prints, and I felt it soak through my sock, icy cold. That snapped me out of it. I turned and bolted toward the cruiser, every step echoing too loud, the whispers chasing me, threading through the air. My name, again and again, overlapping, voices piling on top of each other until it felt like the bridge itself was speaking. I slammed into the car, yanked the door open and dove inside, locked it, started the engine, headlights blasting the dark. When I looked back at the overpass, the figure was gone. But the smell lingered. It clung to me all the way back to town, soaked into my clothes, my hair, my skin. I couldn't scrub it out. No matter how many showers I took, no matter how much soap, it stayed. That thick, damp smell of rain that never came, and the footprints, I still see them. Sometimes in the station hallway after a long shift, sometimes outside my own front door, always wet, always leading into the shadows. The worst part is, I know what happens if I follow them again. I know where they end, and I'm starting to think they don't belong to him. They belong to me. I didn't tell anyone about the footprints. Not at first. Not about the voice either. How could I? It sounded insane. A man standing under a bridge was one thing. Wet, human-shaped footprints appearing on a dry road. That was another. A whisper that knew my name? That was the kind of detail that got you benched, sent to counseling, marked as unstable. So I kept it to myself. But the smell lingered, and the memory lingered. A week later, I couldn't hold it anymore. I had to say something, even if it was just to test the waters. I was sitting in the break room late at night, half drinking bad coffee, when my partner, Dan, came in. He was older than me, about 20 years on the job. Solid, reliable, the kind of guy who could walk into a nightmare call and come out steady. We sat in silence for a while, the way night officers do. Then I said, without planning to, "You ever get a call you couldn't explain?" He didn't answer right away. He just stirred his coffee, slow, like he was buying time. Finally, he looked at me and said, "Which bridge?" I froze. I hadn't mentioned a bridge, not a word. But he knew. He always knew more than he let on. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. His face was hard, but his eyes gave him away. There was something there I'd never seen before. Fear. Real fear. "County Road?" I asked. My voice came out shaky. Dan nodded. "Yeah, County Road." That's when he told me his story. It was 10 years earlier. He was a younger man then, still doing night shifts without complaint, still convinced the job was about keeping order instead of just filling reports. Dispatch sent him out to check on a vagrant under the bridge. Same as me. He drove out there, parked on the shoulder, walked in with his flashlight. He swore the second he stepped under that concrete, he felt it. "The air changes out there," he said. "Gets heavy, like you're underwater. You know what I mean?" I nodded. I did. He said he found the man standing dead center under the bridge, not moving, not even swaying, just rooted. He called out, identified himself as law enforcement. No response. He got closer, closer than I ever did, and when he shined his light on the man's face, he stopped talking then. I pressed him. "What did you see?" His jaw worked like he wanted to say it, but the words wouldn't come. He just stared down into his coffee, knuckles white around the cup. Finally, he muttered, "Not a face." That was all he'd give me, not a face. He told me he turned and left, just walked away. Didn't call it in, didn't write it up. Nothing. I knew if I reported what I saw, they'd pull me off the road, and I wasn't ready for that. So I kept it to myself. I asked why he never warned anyone, why he never told me or anyone else who might have gone out there. Dan's eyes shifted toward the far wall, like he was watching something that wasn't really there. Then he said something that stuck with me. "Because it's worse once you talk about it. That's how it spreads." His voice cracked a little, and I realized this wasn't just another story to him. This was something that had followed him for years. I wanted to laugh it off, to shake my head, but I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen. Not after hearing my own name whispered from the concrete. "Did it ever come back?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just tapped his finger against the table. Slow. Rhythmic. Finally, he said, "I hear it when it rains. Always when it rains. Smells like wet earth. Like it's outside my window." The hairs on my arms stood up. He leaned forward then, eyes locking on mine. "Don't go back there. You hear me? Whatever. You think you saw, whatever you think you need to figure out, it's not worth it. It never leaves you." There was a weight in his words. Like he wasn't just warning me. Like he was begging me. After that night, Dan never spoke of it again. I tried to bring it up once more, weeks later, but he shut me down hard. He just shook his head and walked away. Like the conversation itself was dangerous, and maybe he was right. Because ever since I talked to him, the whispers have been louder. I lie in bed at night, eyes closed, trying to ignore them. The sound of my name, soft, repeating. It blends with the patter of rain that isn't there. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I see the prints on my floor. Wet, glistening, leading from the door to the side of the bed. I told myself they were dreams, stress, tricks of the mind. But one night I touched the carpet where the prints had been. My hand came back damp. Dan was right. Talking about it made it worse. But keeping it inside, that's not an option anymore. Because it's not just whispers now. Last night I woke to the sound of dripping water. I sat up, heart hammering, thinking maybe the roof was leaking. The room was dark, but I could smell it. The sharp scent of wet soil, fresh rain. I reached for the lamp, but before I could flick it on, I heard it. Not my name this time. Not words, just breathing. Slow, deep. And it was right beside me. I froze, too afraid to move, too afraid to look. I don't know how long I sat there listening, but eventually it faded. The smell, the sound, it all slipped away. When I finally turned on the light, the floor beside my bed was wet, and the footprints, they weren't mine. I had promised myself I wouldn't go back. I repeated it like a prayer, like a shield. No matter how strong the pull got, no matter how loud the whispers became, I wouldn't drive that road again. But promises don't hold against dreams. It started a few weeks after I talked with Dan. The first one came soft, almost subtle. I dreamed of the overpass, empty and silent. The concrete glistening like it had just rained. I stood at a distance, watching shadows gather in the cracks above. No sound, no movement, just the pressure of being watched. The next night, the dream came again, only this time I wasn't alone. There was someone standing under the bridge, someone shaped like me. At first, I thought I was looking into a mirror. Same uniform, same flashlight dangling at my side, same tired posture. But the face, it wasn't mine. Not exactly. It was darker somehow. Hollowed out, like the skin was stretched too thin, and it was waving me closer. I woke drenched in sweat, the smell of wet concrete filling my lungs, like the dream had followed me out of sleep. Every night after, the same vision returned, me under the bridge, calling me in silence, beckoning. Sometimes the figure tilted its head, just a little, like it was studying me. Other times it raised its hand, pointing to the ground at its feet. Each time I swore I'd resist, but each time I felt my body leaning closer to the glass, drawn toward that reflection like it had something I needed. The days grew worse. I'd catch myself staring out at the rain-streaked windows of the station, seeing my own outline where no reflection should be. Standing in the parking lot near the trees, watching. I stopped telling people. Dan already thought I'd gone too far. I could see it in his eyes. He regretted even opening up to me. If I said more, if I admitted what I was seeing, he'd cut me off completely. But keeping it inside didn't help. It only fed it. Because last night I saw him while I was awake. I had just finished a long shift. The rain had been steady all evening, pounding on the roof of the cruiser, slicking the empty highways. I should have gone home, should have collapsed into bed. Instead, I found myself driving that stretch of road, county road, without even meaning to. My hands were tight on the wheel, my eyes locked on the dark horizon, but inside I was screaming at myself to turn back. When I reached the curve where the overpass cut across the road, I slowed down. The headlights carved pale lines across the concrete, and my stomach turned, because there he was, standing dead center, under the bridge. Me. The figure was exactly my size, my build, my uniform. His stance was so familiar it made my chest tighten. But his head was tilted, just like in the dream. The same slow, deliberate angle, as though he'd been waiting for me, and his hand was up. Waving me closer, I killed the headlights, sat there in the dark with the rain tapping on the windshield, my breath fogging the glass. I wanted to believe it was a trick, a shadow, some kid messing around in a stolen jacket, but even then, deep down, I knew. It wasn't someone else, it was me. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even shift his weight. Just stood there, arm rising and falling, calling me wordlessly. I gripped the wheel so tight my hands hurt. Every nerve in my body screamed to drive, to get out of there. But the longer I sat, the stronger the pull became. It wasn't curiosity. It was need. Like he had something I'd lost. Something I couldn't live without. I don't know how long I stared. The wipers dragged across the glass, smearing rain into warped streaks. My reflection in the window blurred, doubled. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I was in the car or under the bridge, which one was really me. That thought cracked something inside me. I started the car, slammed it into gear, and drove. Not toward him. Away. Away from the bridge, away from the smell of rain-soaked concrete. My chest felt tight, my hands shaking so bad I almost veered off the road. But even as I sped down the highway, I caught a glimpse in the rear-view mirror. He was still waving, and I swear to God his hand was moving faster. Now, sitting here, I keep asking myself what it means. Why me? Why my reflection? Was this what Dan saw all those years ago? Not a stranger, not a face, but himself? Maybe that's why he couldn't talk about it. Maybe that's why he warned me it spreads. Because once you see yourself standing there, you can't unsee it. I can feel him now, even when I'm not near the bridge, in windows, in mirrors, in the black surface of rain puddles, a shape I know too well, standing just a little too still, just a little too wrong, and he's always waving, always calling me closer. I don't know how much longer I can resist. Because every night the dreams pull me deeper. The space between me and him grows shorter. Last night, I dreamed of stepping out of the car. My boots hit the wet road, my flashlight beam slid across the concrete, and my reflection under the bridge smiled. Not wide, not human, just enough to show me that he's been waiting. And I woke with my hand raised, waving. They say after enough years on the job, the small stuff stops bothering you. That's a lie. It's always the small calls that stick, the ones that don't make sense, the things you can't explain and can't really forget. That's what this was supposed to be. A small call, a welfare check, nothing urgent, nothing loud. The dispatcher told me a neighbor had called in about an old farmhouse on the edge of town. They said the porch light had been on for weeks, not just a night here or there. Weeks. And nobody had seen anyone go in or out. It didn't sound like much. People leave lights on all the time. Some folks like the sense of security. Some just forget. But something about the way the dispatcher said it, I don't know. There was a pause in her voice, like she was reading words but didn't want to say them. The drive out there was long and empty. Back roads with fields stretched wide, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I remember passing a broken fence, the wood bleached gray by years of sun, and thinking it looked like a row of crooked teeth. By the time I turned onto the gravel driveway, the sun was almost gone. The house sat back from the road, swallowed up in weeds and shadows. And sure enough, the porch light was on. It glared against the dark like a single eye, sharp and unnatural. You could see bugs swarming around it, hitting the bulb and burning themselves on the heat. I parked by the gate and sat there for a moment, engine ticking. My gut twisted in that quiet way it does when you know something isn't right, but you can't say what. The house looked abandoned. Paint peeling, shutters hanging loose, the porch sagging like old bones. But that light, it was steady, newer than the house around it. I got out and started up the drive. Gravel crunched under my boots, loud against the silence. I kept waiting to hear a dog bark, or someone's voice, or even a door creak. But the only sound was the low buzz of that light, electric and constant. I knocked on the door. No answer. I called out, introduced myself like I always do. Nothing. The knob turned too easily in my hand, like it hadn't been locked in years. The door opened with a groan that echoed through the halls inside. The smell hit first. Not rotten exactly, not fresh either. Stale. Air that hadn't moved in too long. I stepped inside and called out again. My voice sounded strange, swallowed by the walls. The living room looked like time had stopped. Old furniture draped in sheets. A television with knobs instead of buttons, a rug worn thin at the edges. Dust lay thick on everything, except for one thing, the floor. There were faint footprints leading deeper into the house. I froze. That's the thing about welfare checks. Most of the time, you don't find anyone. But sometimes you do. And you're never sure what state you'll find them in. I followed the prints into the hall. The wallpaper was peeling, water stains blooming up near the ceiling. The air grew colder as I walked. Every door I passed, I glanced in. Empty bedrooms, a bathroom with a cracked mirror, a closet full of old coats, all untouched. Then I saw it. At the end of the hall, just before the kitchen, the back door. It was bolted shut. No one had gone in or out that way. So whoever made those footprints, they were still inside. I gripped my radio, thought about calling it in, but something stopped me. Some part of me wanted to know first, wanted to see with my own eyes. The kitchen was dim, curtains drawn, only a sliver of light from the porch leaking in. The table sat in the middle of the room, 4 chairs around it. Plates and cups, laid out neat, and food. I swear to you, food. A roast, vegetables, bread. It was all still there. Gray, shriveled, eaten by time, but set out like someone had just left the room mid-dinner. My throat went dry. The footprints ended at the table. I stood there, staring, waiting for something to move. For some figure to rise from the shadows and explain all of this. But nothing happened. I circled the table, slow, every step loud against the quiet. The food was untouched. Mold bloomed on the bread. The meat had hardened into something like leather. It had been sitting there for a long, long time, and yet the porch light was still on. I felt the weight of the house pressing in, the silence growing heavy. My own breath sounded wrong in my ears, too loud. That's when I noticed the picture frames on the wall. Family portraits, lined up in a neat row. Husband, wife, 2 kids. Smiling, stiff, the kind of photos people used to take at department stores. I stepped closer, looked at each face, and then my stomach dropped. In the corner of one photo, small, almost hidden, there I was. Not older, not younger. Me, standing at the edge of the frame, blurred like I wasn't supposed to be there. My hands went cold. I turned away, heart pounding, and walked back through the hall, past the prints, past the sagging furniture. Out the front door, into the night air. The porch light buzzed above me, steady as ever. I don't remember walking back to the cruiser. I don't even remember starting the engine. I just remember glancing up at the house one last time before I pulled away. The light was still on, and I knew deep down that it wouldn't go off. Not until I went back inside. I should have left that night. I should have walked out, filed a simple report, and never looked back. But the truth is, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That table. It followed me home like a splinter in my mind. 4 chairs, 4 plates, 4 meals untouched yet rotting where they sat. And the photographs on the wall, the blurred shadow of myself staring back from years before I was even born. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, it was shallow and restless. I'd wake in the middle of the night, swearing I heard the faint hum of electricity, like the porch light had taken root inside my head. A week later, I went back. I told myself it was to close the case. to check one more time before I filed it away. But the truth was, I needed answers. The house had wrapped itself around me, and the only way forward was through. It was early evening when I parked at the gate again. The light was still burning above the porch, steady as ever. Moths fluttered around it, battering themselves against the glass. The same stillness clung to the place. Grass uncut, shutters hanging, silence stretching across the fields. Inside, the air was just as stale. My boots echoed on the wooden floorboards as I moved down the hall. The footprints I'd seen last time were faint now, lost under a new layer of dust. When I stepped into the kitchen, my stomach turned. The table was exactly the same. Plates still set. Food still sitting there, only worse. The roast had collapsed into a dark husk, the skin splitting open in places. Vegetables had shriveled down to black knots. The bread was crawling with mold, white fuzz spreading across it like frost. The cups were filled with water turned brown with dust, but none of it looked touched, not a single bite, not a single utensil out of place. I walked around the table, slow, my eyes on every detail. The chairs were tucked in, neat, as though the family had simply stood up and walked away mid-dinner. I found myself staring at the chair nearest the head of the table. My chest tightened. I could almost see someone sitting there. Fork raised halfway to their mouth, frozen in time. I tried to shake it off. Focus. I pulled my flashlight from my belt and leaned in closer. That's when I noticed the silverware. At first it looked normal. Forks, knives, spoons laid out. But when I really looked, I realized they weren't just set at random. They were placed perfectly. Each one angled the same way, each plate aligned, each napkin folded sharp. Too perfect. It didn't look like a meal anymore. It looked like a display. And then something colder hit me. There were 4 places set, 4 chairs, 4 meals. But in the photos on the wall, I'd only counted 3 children, a family of 4. So who was the 5th? I stood there frozen, staring at that table. The buzzing in my ears grew louder. My skin prickled. That's when I felt it. A draft. I turned. The curtains in the kitchen window shifted, even though the glass was shut tight. The air moved across the back of my neck, cool and damp. And then faint, so faint I almost convinced myself it was nothing. I heard it. The scrape of a chair, not loud. Just enough. I spun back toward the table. Nothing had changed. The chairs were tucked in. The plates sat where they had before. But I swear on my life one of them had moved. I stepped closer, heart pounding. My hand brushed against the back of a chair. It was warm. The smell hit me next. Not just rot. Something sharper. Like copper. Like blood, I backed away. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it across the table, across the walls, across the doorway, and then it landed on the photographs again. The same family. Same stiff smiles. Same cheap backdrops, only one of the frames was different now. I stepped closer, my breath shallow. It was the photo with me in it. The blurred shadow of myself, standing at the edge. Only this time it wasn't blurred. It was clear, and I was sitting at the table, my face pale, my eyes sunken. A fork in my hand, raised halfway like I had been caught mid-bite. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a chair. My pulse hammered in my ears. The table, the photographs, the porch light, it all spun together in my head, a storm of dread I couldn't escape. I wanted to run. God, I wanted to run. But my legs wouldn't move. The buzzing grew louder. I realized it wasn't just in my head. It was coming from the light above the table. I looked up. A single bulb hung there, glowing faintly. It hadn't been on when I came in. I knew it hadn't. But now it flickered. Weak, like a dying heartbeat, and in that faint glow, the shadows around the table shifted. 4 figures. I couldn't see them clearly, just outlines, seated where the chairs were. But I felt them, felt their eyes on me, heavy and unblinking. I staggered back out of the kitchen, through the hall. My flashlight beam bounced across peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceilings. When I burst through the front door, the porch light hit me like a slap. Blinding. I stood there, gasping, staring up at it. And in that moment, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The porch light hadn't been left on by mistake. It was a beacon, a way to call me back, and it had worked. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't file a report. I just sat in my car staring at the steering wheel, knowing I'd be back, because that table wasn't done with me. Not yet. I don't know why I went back a third time. Maybe I was chasing proof. Maybe I just wanted to see if it was still there, if I really saw what I thought I saw. Or maybe the truth is simpler. The house didn't let me go. Every night after leaving that place, I swore I wouldn't return. I'd sit in my car shaking, staring out at the empty road like I was trying to convince myself the world was still real. But the porch light burned in my head, steady, waiting. I could feel it pulling me. This time, it was late afternoon when I parked by the gate. The sun was dipping low, throwing long shadows across the grass. And sure enough, the light above the porch was already on, glowing faint against the daylight. It was like it never turned off. Inside, the air was even heavier. The silence pressed down like a weight. I could smell the rot before I even reached the kitchen. And the table, it hadn't changed. Not an inch. The food was black sludge now, fused to the plates. Mold climbed up the edges like frost patterns, twisting across the tablecloth. The chairs were still tucked in, perfect, waiting, and above it the bulb still flickered. I should have turned around, walked out, shut the door, and never looked back. But my eyes landed on the mantel. The first time I'd been in the house, I'd noticed the photographs. I told myself I wouldn't look again, but now something about them felt different. The frames lined the mantel in a neat row, dust gathering on the glass. Some were the same ones I'd already seen. The family portraits, the stiff school photos. The mother with a fixed smile. The father in his work shirt. The kids in awkward poses. But near the center, one photo caught my eye. It was an old print, black and white, edges yellowed. I stepped closer, squinting, and my stomach dropped. It was the dinner table. Not just any dinner table, the same one behind me. The same arrangement of chairs, plates, silverware, and seated there was me. I stared, unblinking, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just someone who looked like me. It was me. My face, my eyes, even the scar on my cheek from when I fell off my bike as a kid. But it wasn't me as I was now. It was me as a boy. 9, maybe 10 years old. Hair shorter, rounder face, but unmistakably me. Sitting at that table, a plate in front of me, fork in hand. The same posture I'd seen in the photograph before. The one that had changed, the room spun. I gripped the edge of the mantel, trying to steady myself. It didn't make sense. How could I be in a picture that old? How could I be in a place I'd never been before? And yet, a part of me remembered. It hit me all at once, a flash, like a dream I'd forgotten until someone whispered it back. The smell of roast chicken, the clink of silverware, a bulb humming overhead. I was there, or at least, something inside me believed I was. My flashlight beam shook across the photo. The longer I stared, the more details I noticed. There were other people at the table. The parents, the kids, their faces blurred, hard to make out. But I was clear. Perfect. As if the whole photo had been built around me, my hands were sweating. My throat was dry. I backed away, but the weight of those faces, blurred, watching, hung on me. I turned toward the table again, and for a moment, I saw myself sitting there. Not the boy this time. Me. Present-day me. I was seated at the head, pale, unmoving, staring back. I blinked, and it was gone. The chair sat empty. I rubbed my eyes, tried to steady my breathing. The buzzing grew louder. My chest ached. I needed to leave. I started toward the door, fast. My boots pounded on the floorboards. But just as I reached the hall, something caught my ear. A sound. Not loud. Not sharp. A whisper. It came from the kitchen. I froze. Every part of me screamed to keep walking. To get out. But against my will, I turned back. The bulb flickered. The table sat in shadow. And I swear, I heard my own voice, faint, childlike. Sit down. The hair on my arms stood straight. My body went cold. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Sit down." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "No." My voice cracked in the silence. "No, I'm not." The bulb snapped. The kitchen fell into darkness. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe, and then the porch light outside flared, flooding through the window. In that glow, I saw the table one last time. 4 chairs. 4 plates, and the 5th chair pulled out. Waiting, my chair. I ran. I don't even remember the drive back. Just the sound of gravel under my tires, my pulse in my ears, my mind replaying that photograph over and over again. It sits in my head like a splinter. That boy was me. I know it. I don't care what anyone says. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't coincidence. It was me, and I think I've been here before. Not in this life. Not in this body. But somewhere. Somehow. This house knows me. The table knows me, and it's waiting for me to come back. The scanner has always been like background noise to me. A constant crackle. A voice now and then. Codes, numbers, little pieces of somebody else's trouble. It's the kind of sound you stop hearing after a while, like the hum of a refrigerator or the ticking of a clock. But that night it was different. It was past 2 in the morning. The town was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only one alive for miles. I'd parked at the edge of the service road, headlights off, just listening to the steady buzz of the radio. The air was heavy, pressing down, and my eyelids kept wanting to slip shut. Then the static changed. It wasn't just random hiss anymore. There was a shape in it, a rhythm. Like breathing. I sat up straight. Adjusted the dial a little, thinking maybe I'd picked up interference from another channel. The sound cleared, only to collapse again into broken noise. And in that noise, I heard it. A woman's voice. Faint. Muffled. Like she was calling from a long way off. Help. My blood went cold. I leaned closer, twisting the volume knob until the static was sharp enough to sting my ears. Help me? It wasn't an alert. No dispatcher. No code. Just raw, ragged words pushing through the static. I tried to respond. "This is Unit 12. Identify yourself." My voice shook more than I'd like to admit. Nothing. The hiss rose and fell, almost like waves crashing. Then again, clear enough this time to leave no doubt, please. "He's coming." I gripped the mic tight. Looked around at the empty road, as if expecting to see someone running toward me in the dark, but there was nothing. Just the trees swaying against the night sky, shadows shifting on the asphalt. I called dispatch. Asked if there had been any reports of a disturbance. A domestic, anything. They came back calm, routine. Nothing on the board. No calls pending, but the scanner was still alive. The woman's breathing cut in and out, jagged, desperate. I could hear her footsteps too, or maybe I just imagined it, but it sounded like she was running. Hard. Every instinct in me screamed to move, to find her, but there was no location, no signal. Just a voice bleeding out of the static. I flipped through channels, checked frequencies. Every time I came back, she was there, buried in the noise. "Don't let him find me, please." My skin prickled. My mouth went dry. Who was she talking to? Me or someone else? The scanner hissed, a burst of distortion filling the cab. And then under it all, another sound. Low, rough, a man's voice. Too distorted to make out words at first, but close enough to cut through me. The woman screamed. High and sharp, so real it felt like she was in the seat beside me. I flinched hard, heart racing, and the sound cut back to static. I sat frozen, staring at the mic in my hand, my own breath ragged. No part of me wanted to believe what I'd heard. Maybe it was a prank, some idiot playing games with a ham radio, but the fear in her voice, it was real. Too real. I started the engine and pulled onto the road, not knowing where I was going, just moving. Every bend of the scanner made me feel like I was chasing something I couldn't catch. The voice came again, broken into pieces like words lost in a storm. Behind. Please, help me. And then silence, not static, not hiss, just nothing. I tapped the scanner, checked the wires, flicked the knob back and forth. Dead. I drove for another hour. Circling roads I'd driven 100 times, headlights cutting across empty fields and shuttered houses. My chest felt tight the whole time, waiting for the voice to come back, but it didn't. When dawn broke, pale and cold, I parked outside the station, and the scanner came alive again. This time, no voice, no woman, just a sound I didn't understand until it grew louder. Breathing. Slow. Heavy. Not mine. It filled the car, crackling through the speaker. So close it felt like someone leaning over my shoulder. I yanked the cord out, heart slamming in my chest. The scanner went dead. But even after it was gone, I swear I could still hear it. Faint. Steady. Inside the silence. And I've never been able to shake the thought that someone, somewhere, was listening back. I didn't tell anyone about the woman's voice. Not at first. Cops don't usually talk about that kind of thing. You mention hearing things that aren't supposed to be there, and people start looking at you different, like you're tired or maybe unfit for the job. But the sound stayed with me. Even when the scanner was silent, I remembered her. The way she screamed, the way she begged. The way her words seemed to sink under my skin as if they were meant for me and no one else. A week later, the sergeant called me in. He'd been going through overnight logs, checking for inconsistencies. He mentioned my report from that night, me calling dispatch about possible interference. He wanted details, so I told him. Not all of it, just enough. Static, a woman's voice, distorted. I said maybe someone was messing around with a radio. He didn't laugh, didn't roll his eyes. He just nodded like he'd already heard something similar before. And then he said, "Check the archives." That was it. No explanation. Just 3 words. The archives are a mess. Old recordings, stacks of tapes, boxes nobody touches anymore. These days, everything's digital, but back then, not everything had been converted. I went down there after my shift, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The air was stale, smelled like dust and metal. Rows of shelves with binders, tapes, files. It felt more like a morgue than a record room. I pulled the box marked with the date of that night, popped the cassette into the player, and I listened. Static, breathing, then her voice. Just like I remembered. Clearer this time, somehow sharper when played back. "Help me!" I froze. It was real. I hadn't imagined it. But then something else happened. After her words faded, another voice came through. Low, strained, male. I felt the blood drain from my face when I recognized it. It was me. My own voice. "Please. He's coming. Don't let him find me, please." My throat went dry. My chest tightened. I sat there staring at the player, listening to myself beg for help. My voice cracked, panicked, terrified in a way I've never been in my life. But here's the thing. That recording was from years before I joined the force. I checked the label again. Date 2009. I wasn't even out of high school yet. I replayed it, hoping I'd been mistaken. Hoping maybe it only sounded like me. But no. The tone, the way I said certain words, the rhythm of my breath, it was me. Without question, I wanted to stop listening, but I couldn't. The recording played out with the same awful loop. The woman calling for help. The man's voice, faint but closing in. And then me. My voice, pleading like a trapped animal. At the end, there was a sound I can't forget. A sharp, hollow knock. Like knuckles against glass. And then silence. I rewound it. Listened again. Over and over until the sound etched itself into my bones. I slammed the stop button and sat in the dark, trying to make sense of it. How could my voice be on that tape? Was it a trick? Someone messing with me? A coincidence? No, I knew myself too well. That was me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again. My own voice, pleading through static. The next day, I tried to push it out of my mind. Told myself I'd imagined it, that I was tired. But the more I tried, the heavier it pressed on me. Finally, I went back. I pulled more boxes, more tapes. Not just from that night, but from years around it. Random shifts, random dates, and I listened. Most of it was ordinary. Old calls, dispatch chatter, routine stuff, but sometimes in the background, faint, buried in the static. I'd hear it again, me, not always words. Sometimes just breathing. Sometimes a sob. Sometimes a half-formed plea cut off before it made sense. Each time it was older than I should have been. years before I ever wore a badge. Once I heard something worse. It was me, but it wasn't begging. It was laughing. A hollow, broken laugh that didn't sound like it belonged to me at all. I shut the tape off right then, my hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. I didn't know who to tell. Didn't know if I should tell anyone at all. It felt like the recordings weren't just random pieces of the past. They were warnings, or maybe predictions. Like the scanner was reaching forward and backward at the same time, pulling voices from places they weren't supposed to be. And the more I listened, the more I started to believe something I didn't want to admit, that someday one of those cries for help would be real. That maybe I wasn't hearing a past that had already happened. Maybe I was hearing my own future. I stopped going down there after that. I shoved the tapes back into their boxes and walked away. But I can't walk away from the sound. It still creeps in late at night when the scanner hisses in the background. Sometimes I think I hear her again. The woman, her voice trembling through the static. And sometimes, just under hers, I hear my own voice. And each time, it's closer, like it's waiting for the night when the recording finally catches up with me. Night shifts blur together after a while. The same roads, the same empty parking lots, the same feeling that you're the last person awake in a world that's gone to sleep. It was just after midnight when the call came through. Complaint of a loiterer at the Sunoco on the west side of town. Nothing serious, nothing worth adrenaline. Just another go check it out kind of thing. The voice on the other end was the clerk. He sounded shaken, like maybe he was new. He said there was a man standing by the pumps. Not moving, not buying anything, just staring. I almost asked what the big deal was, but something in his tone made me stop. He wasn't annoyed. He was afraid. I pulled into the lot a few minutes later. The place looked ordinary at first glance. Fluorescent lights humming, the bright red numbers glowing over the pumps, the empty lot stretching out toward the dark fields behind. But then I saw him, the man. He was standing between pump 3 and 4, not moving, hands at his sides, his face turned toward the rows of pumps like he was studying them. I slowed the cruiser and pulled in. My headlights washed over him, but he didn't flinch, didn't look, didn't even shift his weight, just still. The clerk came out of the glass booth, waving me over. He looked pale under the buzzing lights, his eyes darting back to the man every few seconds. I called because he's been here for almost an hour, the kid whispered. He hasn't moved, not once. He's not waiting for gas, he's not doing anything. I nodded, stepped out of the car. The air smelled faintly of gasoline, sharp and sour. I approached the man slowly, keeping my voice steady. Evening, sir. You okay out here? No answer. I moved closer. His clothes were ordinary, jeans, a dark jacket, work boots. He looked like anyone else you'd see in town, except for the way he held himself. Perfectly still. His eyes were locked on the pump, but I couldn't tell if he was really looking at it. His gaze was unfocused, like he was staring through it. Sir? I tried again. You can't just stand here. The station's closed except for pay at the window. Nothing. The only sound was the buzz of the lights overhead, and the faint hiss of the pumps settling in the cool night. I was close, enough now to see his face. His skin was pale, almost gray in the harsh light. His mouth hung open just slightly, his lips dry, and his eyes. They didn't blink. Not once. I shifted uneasy. For a second, I wondered if he was sick or on something. Do you have ID on you? I asked. My voice felt too loud in the empty lot. Still nothing. I reached out gently to touch his sleeve, just to see if I could break whatever spell he was under. The moment my fingers brushed his jacket, he moved. Not much. Just his head. It turned slowly, so slowly it was almost painful to watch, until his face was pointed at me, and then he smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't friendly. It was just enough to show teeth, just enough to make the air in my chest freeze. I took a step back. My hand hovered near my belt, not drawing, but ready. Sir, I'm going to need you to tell me your name. He didn't answer. He just kept smiling. His lips moved, soundless at first, like he was trying to form words. Then, barely audible, he whispered something. I leaned closer, straining to hear. It was my name, whispered like he'd been waiting all night to say it. The hair on my arms stood up. I hadn't introduced myself. The clerk hadn't said a word. But this man knew me. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice even. "How do you know who I am?" The smile didn't change. His eyes didn't leave mine, and then, as if a switch had been flipped, he turned back toward the pump. No hesitation. No movement wasted. Just back to staring, like nothing had happened. The clerk called out from behind me, his voice trembling. Is he okay?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, staring at this man who knew my name, watching his stillness in the glow of the gas station lights. Something in me wanted to drag him away, haul him to the station, demand answers. But another part of me, deeper, older, told me to leave him exactly where he was. I backed away slowly. Got into the cruiser, told the clerk to lock the doors, keep the windows shut, and call again if the man moved. As I pulled out of the lot, I looked back one last time. He was still there, still staring at the pump, still waiting, and even from that distance, I swear I could see the corner of his mouth curl upward, like he knew I was watching, like he was smiling just for me. I should have gone home after that first night. I should have just written it up as a loitering complaint, filed the paperwork, and let it die in the stack of reports nobody ever looks at again. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because that man. The way he said my name without ever being told, it stuck with me. I tried to forget, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing there, motionless, watching, waiting. The next night, I found myself driving back toward the gas station without even realizing where I was going. The lot looked the same. Bright lights, empty pumps, nothing moving, except him. He was there again, same spot, same stance, like he hadn't moved in 24 hours. I parked the cruiser, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than they should have. My chest felt heavy. My brain kept whispering reasons not to get out, but my body didn't listen. I stepped into the cool night air. It smelled the same as before, gasoline and dust, with that strange electric hum from the overhead lights. He was waiting. His head tilted slightly this time, like he'd heard something just before I arrived. I forced myself forward. Each step felt like I was walking into water, thick and slow. "Sir," I said, though my voice cracked in the middle, "I need you to leave the property." "Do you understand me?" No answer. Just that faint, lifeless stare toward the pumps. I got closer. My boots scraped against the concrete. My hand brushed the cruiser at my side as if to anchor myself. That's when it happened. A sharp ringing, like feedback from a radio, pierced the air. Not from my scanner, not from the pumps. From him. The sound was faint, but it was coming out of his mouth. Not words, not even a groan. Just static. My knees went weak. I took a step back, my pulse hammering in my ears. "What the hell are you?" I whispered. He turned, slow as before, his neck cracking like dry wood. His eyes found mine, hollow but fixed, and then I blacked out. No warning, no dizziness, no dream, just gone. When I opened my eyes, I was in my cruiser. The engine was running. The headlights were on. My hands rested on the steering wheel, stiff and cold like they'd been there a long time. I blinked, disoriented. The gas station lights were still glowing in the distance. But something felt wrong. The radio crackled. Dispatch calling my unit, asking if I was still on scene. I checked the dashboard clock. 3 hours had passed. 3 hours gone. I didn't remember getting back into the car. I didn't remember sitting down. I didn't remember anything at all, just nothing. I rubbed my face, trying to shake the fog from my head. My mouth was dry, my throat raw, like I'd been screaming. But the weirdest part wasn't the missing time. It was the smell. Inside the cruiser, it reeked of gasoline, strong, overpowering. My uniform was damp. Like I'd been standing in it, I looked down. My boots were wet. My cuffs smelled like fuel. And on the steering wheel, faintly visible under the glow of the dash lights, were fingerprints, not mine. Larger, longer, pressed deep into the surface, like someone else had been holding it while I wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I glanced at the station. The man was gone. Not by the pumps, not in the lot, just gone. I sat frozen for a long time, unable to start the engine, unable to call it in. My hands shook, My jaw clenched, and every nerve in me screamed that I'd lost something I couldn't ever get back. I finally drove off, the wheels hissing against the wet pavement. At the station, I thought about telling someone. But what was I supposed to say? I blacked out at a gas station and woke up 3 hours later smelling like fuel. They'd call me unfit for duty. They'd run me through tests. I'd lose my badge, so I wrote the report simple. Loiterer, subject left the scene. Nothing unusual, and I lied to myself. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress. Maybe I fell asleep in the car. Maybe the fingerprints were old. Maybe the gas smell was from the pumps. But deep down, I knew because the next morning, when I finally got home and peeled off my damp uniform, I found something on the inside of my sleeve, a smear of black. Oily like grease, except it wasn't. It smelled like gasoline. But underneath it was something else, something sharp, metallic, like blood that had been burned. And in the middle of that smear, faint but clear, was a print, a handprint. Not mine, not human. I scrubbed at it until the fabric tore, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had sunk deeper than the cloth, that it was still on my skin underneath, waiting. And when I finally sat down on my couch, too tired to think, I realized something that chilled me more than anything else. The clock on my wall, it had stopped. Not when I got home, not when I looked at it. Stopped 3 hours earlier, the same hours I'd lost. As if the missing time wasn't just mine. As if the world itself had gone dark with me. And when it came back, when the hand started moving again, it had left something behind. Something that now knew my name and was waiting for me to come back. I didn't sleep for days after it happened. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt those missing hours trying to crawl back in, like they weren't gone at all, like they were just hiding, waiting for the right moment to spill over me. The worst part wasn't the smell of gasoline that lingered on my skin, no matter how many times I scrubbed. It wasn't even the memory of those deep fingerprints pressed into my steering wheel. It was the silence, that silence under the gas station lights, right before the blackout. That's the moment that gnawed at me, replaying itself over and over, demanding answers I couldn't give, so I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I went into the evidence room at the station, pulled my own body cam footage from that night. I thought maybe I'd find some kind of explanation. Maybe the video would show me falling asleep or walking away or anything that could prove I wasn't losing my mind, but when I queued it up and hit play, my heart nearly stopped. At first, everything looked normal. My cruiser pulling into the lot, my boots hitting the pavement, the station's humming lights above me, then me, walking toward the pumps. My voice echoing faintly as I told the man to leave the property. But the man wasn't looking at the pumps anymore. In the footage, he was looking straight at me. And then, this part made my stomach turn, he moved. Not slow. Not stiff. Not like he had been before. No. He moved quick, too quick. And in the footage, he wasn't 20 feet away. He was beside me, right at my shoulder, the entire time. I froze the video. I stared at the still frame, my face pale under the station lights. And there, right next to me, was his outline, his head tilted, almost touching mine, like he'd been whispering. I hit play again. My body on the screen didn't react. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look his way. I just kept talking, kept pacing, kept acting like I was alone. But in the footage, he never left my side. He leaned in, his lips moving against the air by my ear. I couldn't hear what he was saying, not at first. The static on the recording made it faint, distorted. But if you turned the volume all the way up, you could hear it. My name over and over, low, drawn out, like it wasn't even meant to be said out loud. I yanked the headphones off so fast they nearly broke. My chest was heaving. My pulse throbbed in my neck. It wasn't possible. I was there. I knew he hadn't been standing beside me. I would have seen him. I would have felt him unless those missing hours weren't really missing. Unless he'd been closer than I could accept. I tried to stop watching, but I couldn't. I had to see more. So I hit play again. The footage glitched, just for a second. A single frame tearing sideways across the screen, And in that split frame, his face filled the lens. Not pale, not blank, something else. Like his features weren't his own. Like they were borrowed, sliding in and out of shape. I blinked, and the next frame was back to normal. Him at my side, me oblivious. My hand hovered over the pause button, trembling. Then the blackout came. The footage cut hard, not like the battery died, not like the camera turned off. It was more violent, like something had reached into the feed and torn the signal in half. For 3 hours, there was nothing, just a dead screen until it flickered back. When the video returned, I was already in my cruiser. Same as how I'd woken up, my head tilted against the seat, my hands limp on the wheel, and standing outside the driver's window was him bent low, face against the glass, watching me, whispering. My throat went dry. My whole body shook as I leaned closer to the screen. His mouth was moving again, faint sound bleeding through the mic. It wasn't just my name this time. It was laughter. But not real laughter. Not human. The kind that doesn't come from joy or humor. The kind that sounds like someone learning how to laugh by listening to people and imitating the noise. Hollow. Wrong. I stopped the footage and pulled the drive from the player. I wanted to destroy it, crush it under my boot, burn it, but I didn't. Because part of me knew it wouldn't matter. The footage wasn't the problem. The problem was that I had no memory of it happening. None. And yet the evidence said otherwise. The whispers, the missing hours, the fingerprints. He hadn't just been standing by the pumps. He'd been beside me. He'd been with me the entire time. And maybe he still was, because ever since that night I've started hearing it again. Not on tape, not through static, in the silence of my apartment, in the gaps between radio calls. A low murmur, so faint it could be in my head, but every now and then, clear as day, I hear it my name whispered, like it's right at my shoulder, and when I turn, there's nothing there. Nothing, at all. But I don't need to see him anymore to know. I know he's there. Closer than the footage showed. Closer than I want to admit. And waiting for me to black out again. The call came in just after midnight. Dispatch said it was about a little girl. A driver had pulled over on the edge of the state forest. He swore he saw a child standing at the tree line no more than 6 or 7 years old. She was crying, he said, but when he got out of his truck to help her, she slipped back into the trees. The way he described it, it didn't sound like a normal lost kid situation. He said she never made a sound. No voice, no sobs, just the movements of crying, shoulders shaking, hands rubbing at her face. And that was enough for them to send me. I remember sitting in my cruiser, parked on the gravel shoulder, staring at that black wall of trees. My spotlight barely touched it. The beam caught on branches and trunks, but the forest swallowed most of the light before it even touched the ground. There's something about woods at night. They don't just look dark, they look alive. Like the shadows are standing still on purpose, waiting for you to make the first move. I didn't want to step in there, but I had to. So I called it in, took a breath, and started walking toward the tree line. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The road behind me had been humming with insects, the occasional car. But the second I stepped past the first tree, it was gone. No crickets, no owls, not even wind in the leaves. My boots crunched on dead pine needles. That was it. That was the only sound. And then I saw it, a small footprint in the dirt. It looked fresh, too. Barefoot, the toes pressed deep like someone had been running, small enough to be a child's. I followed. The forest was thick, but the footprints were clear. They led deeper in, zigzagging like she didn't know where she was going. I told myself I was getting closer. That any minute I'd see her. I even called out softly at first, "Sweetheart, it's okay, I'm here to help." Nothing answered. I walked farther, shining my light along the ground, picking up more of the tracks. That's when something about them started to bother me. The footprints, they weren't spaced right. At first, they looked like the steps of a running child. But then I realized some were too far apart. Much too far, like whoever made them was leaping, bounding almost. And then suddenly they stopped. The ground ahead was bare. No prints at all, just forest. I froze. My beam swept across the trees. That's when I saw her. She was standing maybe 20 feet away, half hidden behind a trunk. A little girl in a pale dress that caught the light. Her arms hung loose at her sides. Her head tilted. She didn't cry. She didn't move. I felt my chest tighten. My instinct was to go to her, but something in me, something deep, old, and cold, told me not to, so I stayed where I was. "Are you okay?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Do you need help?" Her head tilted a little more. Not curious, not afraid, just wrong. I stepped closer. 1 step. 2. That's when she slipped behind the tree, vanishing into the dark. I ran forward, my light cutting through the branches. But when I reached the spot, she was gone. The woods were empty. I stood there, panting, shining the beam in every direction. My heart was hammering. I couldn't hear her. Couldn't see her, but I felt her. I can't explain it. It was like standing in a room with someone you couldn't see. The air had weight. My skin prickled. Every instinct screamed that I wasn't alone. Then, faint, so faint I almost thought I imagined it, I heard it, a whisper, not words. Just sound, like breath moving through leaves. And it was close, too close. I spun around, my light cutting through the dark. Nothing. I called it in, my voice shaking, told dispatch I needed backup. But the radio crackled, warped. Like the signal was being pulled apart, static hissed in my ear. And underneath it, God help me. I heard laughter, high-pitched, childlike, but not a child's. Not really. I backed away, stumbling, trying to retrace my steps. My light swung wild across the trees, every shadow looking like it was about to step forward. Then, ahead of me, I saw the road, the faint glow of the shoulder. Relief washed over me. I broke into a run, lungs burning until I hit gravel, and when I turned back, when I raised the light one last time, she was standing at the edge of the trees, that pale dress glowing faintly in the dark, her face half hidden, her head still tilted. Watching me, I blinked, and she was gone. Just like that. I don't know how long I stood there, shaking, waiting for backup to arrive. When the other unit pulled up, I couldn't explain it. I just said I thought the girl ran off, that I couldn't find her. But I didn't tell them about the footprints, or the whisper, or the way she stood there, too still, too silent. And I definitely didn't tell them about the laughter, because the truth is, I don't think that was a child. I don't think it ever was. And sometimes, even now, I still hear it, that laugh, carried on the edge of the wind, like it's following me, waiting for me to step back into the trees. I should have let it go. Any sane man would have. But when I went home that morning, her face wouldn't leave me. That pale dress, the way she tilted her head, the silence. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the dark can make tricks out of shadows, out of your own heartbeat. But the next night, when my shift came around, I found myself back at the edge of those same woods. It was quiet again. Too quiet. The other guys teased me when I told them I was going back out there. Said I was chasing ghosts. Maybe they were right. But something in me needed to know. I parked on the shoulder, left the cruiser idling, and stepped into the trees. The forest swallowed me just like before. The air inside felt heavier, colder, like it had been trapped there for centuries. My flashlight beam shook as I swept it across the ground, hoping, fearing, I'd see those same small footprints again. And I did. Fresh, clear as day in the damp dirt, small toes pressed deep. They hadn't been there the night before when I left, which meant she'd been back. I crouched, touched the print with my gloved hand. It was damp, the edges soft, hours old at most. I told myself it was just a child, lost, maybe abandoned, someone who needed help. That's what I was trained for, so I followed. The tracks wound deeper into the woods. They didn't follow any path I knew. They twisted between trees, over roots, through patches of ferns, like she was wandering without direction. I called out again, keeping my voice steady. "Sweetheart, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." No answer. Just the sound of my own breathing, loud in my ears. The deeper I went, the more the forest seemed to press in. The air smelled damp, almost sweet, like rot under the leaves. My light kept catching on things I thought were faces, bark, knots, shadows, until my nerves were raw. And then I noticed something that froze me cold. The prints doubled back. I stopped, my stomach twisting. They weren't just wandering anymore. They led forward, yes, but then I saw them turn sharply, looping back in the opposite direction, and worse, the new set overlapped my own. Her steps had followed mine. I swept my light behind me, heart hammering. The woods stretched empty, silent, but I knew. I knew she'd been there, moving where I'd just walked, and she was barefoot in this cold, wet forest. I tried to reason it out. Maybe I'd gotten turned around. Maybe I was seeing my own tracks from earlier, but the size was too small, too clean. My boots left wide tread marks. Hers were delicate, sharp. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep going. The tracks led me in circles, tighter and tighter, until I realized something else. The footprints weren't random. They were leading me, pulling me deeper, away from the road, into places where even in daylight you'd get lost. I turned my radio on, called dispatch, tried to give them my position. The line fizzed, static chewing the words apart. I caught bits of my own voice breaking through, then silence. It felt like the woods had swallowed the signal. I kept walking. The prints crossed over a patch of soft ground, dark with moisture. I crouched to look closer, and that's when I saw it. The footprints were heavier now, pressed deeper. The toes curled in as if clawing for grip, not walking, not running, crawling. I felt a shiver run the length of my spine. I stood up fast, swinging the light across the trees, and that's when I heard it again. The whisper, faint, brushing against my ear like someone leaning too close. I spun, but no one was there, just empty woods. I forced myself forward, every step slower now. I followed the trail until it stopped at the base of a wide oak tree. The prints went up to it. Then nothing. The ground around the trunk was bare, like she'd vanished right there. I circled the tree with my light, searching, desperate to see where she went, and that's when I looked up. My beam caught on something pale against the branches. For a moment, I thought it was fabric. Torn cloth snagged high above, but it wasn't. It was skin. A hand, small. Fingers long, too long, gripping the bark like roots. It pulled back into the dark before I could see the rest. I staggered back, nearly falling. My breath came sharp, loud in the stillness. The tree was empty now, but I couldn't shake the image of that hand, thin, pale, clutching the bark like it belonged there. That's when the laughter came again. High-pitched, wrong. It didn't echo like a child's voice should. It came from everywhere at once, between the trees, above me, inside my skull. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. It just grew louder, and then it cut out. Dead silent. The kind of silence that feels like the whole forest is holding its breath. I lowered my hands, trembling, and took a step back toward where I thought the road was. My light shook across the ground. That's when I saw them, new prints, not leading away, not circling, coming straight toward me. The small bare feet pressed into the dirt, one after another, as if they'd just been made, and they stopped right at my boots. I froze. I couldn't breathe. My light swung upward, nothing, just the woods, but I swear I felt her. Standing there, inches from me, her breath, cold, brushing my cheek. I stumbled back, heart slamming, and turned, crashing through the undergrowth, following nothing but instinct. I don't even know how I found the road again, but when I broke through the trees, the cruiser's headlights looked like salvation. I didn't stop shaking the whole drive back. I told myself I wouldn't go near those woods again, that I'd leave it alone, but I know better. She's still in there, and she knows me now. She followed my steps once. What's stopping her from following me out? I thought I was done. After that night in the woods, I swore I'd never set foot there again. But the thing about fear is, it doesn't leave you. It waits, it festers, and the silence in my head was louder than the forest ever was. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those prints overlapping mine, Small bare feet walking where I had just walked. That cold breath brushing against my face. And worse, the feeling that she was still close. Not just in the woods, closer. I'd wake up in my bed with the sense that someone had been standing at the foot of it, watching, quiet, waiting for me to notice. So, eventually I gave in. I went back. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. The forest didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a wound, and if I didn't look deeper, it would keep spreading inside me. The prints weren't there this time. The ground was hard, dry, but I remembered the path. I remembered where the laughter had stopped me cold. So I kept walking. The woods opened up into a clearing I hadn't seen before. Wide, empty, except for the remains of something long gone. An old foundation, just stone walls, half sunk into the earth, crumbling around the edges. Whatever had stood there, a cabin maybe, was long gone. But the air felt heavy, thick, as if it still remembered. I stepped over the stones, my boots crunching through dead leaves, and swept my light across the dirt. That's when I saw them. Shoes. Children's shoes. Scattered. Half buried in the soil. Like the earth had been trying to swallow them whole. Tiny sneakers, scuffed and split. Little black dress shoes. The kind you'd wear to church. Even a pair of sandals cracked from the weather. There must have been dozens. My stomach twisted as I crouched down. Some of them were old. Too old, rotted to scraps of leather. Others looked newer. Not clean, but not ancient either. I touched one, brushing the dirt away. It was small, pink, with faded stars on the side. The kind of shoe you'd buy for a little girl, and it didn't look like it had been there long. My throat closed. I stood fast, my light darting around the clearing. My voice caught in my chest, but I forced it out. Hello? Anyone here? Silence. The woods didn't even stir. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just me and the shoes. I tried the radio again. Static. Always static. I don't know why, but I started digging. I dropped to my knees and clawed at the dirt with my hands, pulling up shoes one after another. Every time I thought I'd found the last, another one surfaced, each one smaller than the last. Some had names written inside them, smudged letters in black marker, Sarah, Joey, Hannah. The names blurred in my vision. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the flashlight. That's when I noticed something else. The ground wasn't just filled with shoes. It was soft, like it had been turned. Dug up. I froze. My stomach nodded. I knew what that meant. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. This wasn't just a place where children had been. It was a place where they'd been buried. I staggered back, my boots catching on the stones of the foundation. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out. But before I could, I heard it. The giggle, high-pitched, close. I swung my light across the clearing. There she was, the girl, standing at the far end, just inside the tree line. Same pale dress, same dark hair. Her face was hidden in shadow, but I could see her head tilt again. That strange, too curious angle, and then she stepped forward, bare feet pressing into the dirt, leaving no mark. The shoes around me seemed to hum, like the air itself was vibrating. I backed up, my chest tight. But I couldn't take my eyes off her. She didn't move like a child. Not really. She drifted, slow but steady, her feet barely lifting, as though she wasn't walking at all. I raised my hand, my voice shaking. "Who are you?" She stopped. The silence stretched. So long I thought maybe she wouldn't answer. And then she whispered, not with her mouth, not with sound, inside my head, "Come play." The words slid through my skull like cold water. I stumbled, clutching at my ears, but there was no stopping it. I looked down at the shoes again, at the dozens of small lives that ended here, and I knew. She wasn't just a child. She was all of them, every name, every laugh that had gone silent. Bound together in one shape, one voice, that's why the footprints doubled back. Why the giggles came from everywhere. Why she moved like she wasn't bound by flesh and bone. She wasn't a girl. She was the wood's memory of them, and she wanted me next. The humming grew louder, pressing against my skull. The girl stepped closer, her bare feet brushing across the shoes without a sound. I turned and ran. I don't remember how I made it back through the trees. Branches tore at my arms, the ground pitched under my boots, but somehow I kept moving. The humming followed me, the whisper riding my thoughts, urging me to stop, to play, to stay forever. When I finally broke through to the road, my cruiser was still there. The engine idling, headlights burning against the trees. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and just sat there, shaking. I looked in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her sitting in the back seat. It was empty. But the feeling didn't leave. It hasn't left since, because I know what I saw in that clearing. I know what I pulled out of the dirt, and I know those shoes weren't all buried yet. I didn't go back to the station after that night. I couldn't. If I walked in with dirt under my nails and a story about shoes in the ground, they'd ask questions I couldn't answer. They'd put it in reports, and then it would live on paper forever. I didn't want that. I didn't want any record of what I had seen. So I just drove. I told myself I was heading home, but the truth is I was trying to outrun what I felt clinging to me. That humming in my skull hadn't stopped. It was faint, like a memory of sound, but it was there. The woods didn't stay behind me. They came with me. The highway was empty, just a black ribbon stretching into nowhere, and the cruiser's headlights seemed to cut through a fog that wasn't really there. My reflection in the window looked wrong, like my eyes weren't following the road. They were fixed on something else, and then I saw her, not in the mirror, not in the woods, on my street. I slowed as I pulled up to my house, and the world felt like it dipped sideways. She was standing at the edge of my backyard, the same pale dress, the same dark hair hanging like wet ropes, her head tilted, that impossible angle, as if she'd been waiting for me. My chest locked up. For a second, I thought maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel, that this was another trick of the forest. But no. The cruiser rolled to a stop in my driveway, the engine humming like it didn't want to cut off, and she was still there, motionless, watching. The distance between us was no more than 30 yards, but it felt like nothing. Like if I blinked too long, she'd be at the glass, staring in. I couldn't move. My hand was on the gear shift, frozen. Sweat ran down my back, soaking my shirt. Even though the night was cold, finally I forced myself to breathe. To look again. She hadn't moved, but the porch light flickered once, then steadied. That was enough. I killed the engine, stumbled inside and locked every door, every window. Curtains drawn, lights on, like a kid hiding from a nightmare. But it didn't help, because when I looked out the kitchen window, she was still there, closer, half the distance now. I shut the blinds so hard they cracked. My hands shook against the counter, and my mind kept repeating one thought over and over. She followed me, not the woods, not the memory. Me. I tried to sit on the couch, tried to convince myself it was just my nerves playing tricks, but every creak of the house, every hum of the fridge felt alive, like the walls themselves were listening. And then the whisper started again, not out loud, not through my ears, in my head. Come play. Soft, patient, like a child tugging on your sleeve. I pressed my palms to my temples and shook my head. No, you're not real. You're not, but I didn't finish, because through the living room window, I saw her again, standing at the glass, her face almost touching it. I staggered back, knocking into the table, and the lamp crashed to the floor. The room fell into shadow, and for a heartbeat, I thought she'd slipped inside with me. But when my eyes adjusted, the window was empty, just the smudge of breath against the glass. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights on, my back against the wall, staring at the door, waiting. At some point, I must have drifted, because when the sun came up, I jolted awake. Heart hammering. The yard was empty, no footprints, no figure, just the dew on the grass and the quiet hum of the neighborhood waking up. But the smudge on the glass was still there, and when I leaned closer to wipe it away, I froze. It wasn't just a smudge, it was a handprint. Small, delicate, pressed flat against the inside of the window. I didn't let her in. I swear I didn't let her in. But somehow, she's already here. The storm came in fast that night. One moment the roads were just wet, a steady drizzle tapping the cruiser roof. And the next it was like someone turned the sky upside down. Sheets of rain hammered the windshield, and the wipers couldn't keep up. The radio crackled in my ear, dispatch struggling to cut through the static. Unit, copy, report of crash on Route 17. Vehicle off the road. Unknown injuries. I clicked the mic. Unit 12, I'll respond. That was me. Unit 12, alone on the south end of the county. It wasn't unusual for things to get messy in storms like this. Hydroplane accidents, drunks thinking their trucks were invincible, power poles coming down. But something in the dispatcher's voice made me uneasy. They sounded strained, like the static wasn't just from the storm. Like something else was bleeding through. I didn't ask. I just drove. The road narrowed as I left the main stretch. Trees bent and groaned under the weight of wind, their branches clawing at the roof. The headlights cut a tunnel through the rain, but beyond that tunnel, everything was black. The crash site wasn't hard to find. The first thing I saw was the glow of hazard lights, blinking faintly through the downpour. A sedan had gone nose first into the ditch, its rear wheels still spinning slow. Steam curled from under the crumpled hood, mixing with the storm, and the driver's side door hung wide open. I pulled up behind it, killed the siren and called it in. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've located the vehicle. One sedan off the road. Looks recent. I'm making contact. Static hissed back at me. 12, copy. Loud and clear? I tried again. Unit 12, confirming contact at Route 17. Making approach. 12, repeat. Hear you. Not. And then it cut. I told myself it was just the storm. Radios get temperamental in bad weather. Nothing new. But as I stepped out into the rain, I felt the weight of the silence settle on me. It wasn't just the dispatcher I couldn't hear anymore. It was everything. No tree frogs, no wind through the branches, no distant thunder. Just the slap of water on my uniform and the hollow blink of those hazards. Hello? I called toward the ditch. Nothing. The driver's door yawned wide, the seat empty. The dome light flickered, threatening to go out. I shone my flashlight across the ground. That's when I saw them. Tracks in the mud. Bare feet, small. They led away from the car straight into the trees. I felt my stomach tighten. No shoes. No jacket. Just bare feet in a storm like this. Whoever it was had run, and they'd run fast. I keyed my mic again, but it was just dead air now. The storm still raged, but the radio was silent. I hesitated, standing there with the light cutting into the tree line. Something deep in me said to wait, to get back in the cruiser and hold position until backup arrived. But backup wasn't coming, was it? Not if dispatch couldn't hear me. Not if I was cut off. So I followed. The mud sucked at my boots as I stepped off the road, my beam bouncing across twisted branches and dripping leaves. The tracks were easy enough to see, but they didn't make sense. The stride was uneven, like whoever left them wasn't walking straight. Like they kept doubling back, circling trees, wandering in loops before darting forward again. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the rain. I kept going. The deeper I pushed into the woods, the darker it got. My flashlight seemed weaker, swallowed by the storm. And every time I paused, I swore I could hear something. Breathing, maybe, or a low hum carried on the wind. "Sheriff's office," I called. My voice cracked, thin in the wet air. "If you're hurt, call out. I can help." The only answer was the storm, and then the flashlight beam caught something ahead. A figure, standing between the trees, maybe 20 yards out. I froze. It was hard to see through the rain, but I could make out the shape of a person. Shoulders slumped, head tilted down. "Hey," I called, pushing forward. "Are you injured?" No response. The beam shook in my hand as I closed the distance. The mud pulled harder at my boots, and the tracks underfoot tangled into each other like scribbles on a page. I was maybe 10 yards away when the figure finally looked up. Lightning tore across the sky, and for an instant I saw the face. It wasn't the face of a stranger, it was mine. The light went out. My radio screamed static, sharp and violent, like a voice trying to break through but failing, and then nothing. I wasn't the first to arrive that night. By the time I rolled down Route 17, the storm had already started to eat the road alive. Sheets of water moved like waves across the asphalt, and my wipers barely cleared a path to see through. I almost missed the glow until it flickered against the tree line, red and blue, cutting through the black. One of ours. I slowed, easing up beside the shoulder, and sure enough, Unit 12 was sitting there, lights still flashing, spotlight cutting against the ditch where a sedan was crumpled nose first into the mud. But something wasn't right. The driver's door of the cruiser was wide open, rain hammering into the seat. The headlights had burned grooves into the night, but the officer, my friend, my partner that night, was nowhere in sight. I pulled ahead, killed my siren, and stepped out into the storm. Unit 12 copy? I called into my radio, only static. The rain drowned out most of the world, but it couldn't drown the unease crawling up my spine. I approached the cruiser, shining my flashlight across the dash. The engine was still running. The laptop glowed faint blue, a half-typed note frozen on the screen. But the strangest thing was the radio. It wasn't silent. It was whispering. At first I thought it was interference, maybe dispatch trying to cut through the storm. But the more I listened, the less it sounded like voices I knew. It was softer, broken, a half-dozen voices layered on top of each other. Some male, some female, some so faint I couldn't tell if I was imagining them. I leaned closer. One of them was saying my name. I jerked back, heart pounding, the flashlight beam swinging wild across the cruiser interior. For a second I thought I saw movement in the rearview mirror, a shadow where there shouldn't have been one. But when I turned, nothing was there. Just rain, just trees. I forced myself to breathe, to take it step by step. The sedan was still steaming in the ditch. Its hazards blinked weakly, throwing short bursts of orange light into the night. I slid down the muddy bank and checked inside. Empty. Driver's seat soaked, dome light flickering, footprints in the mud leading straight into the woods. I keyed my mic again, voice low. Dispatch, this is Unit 14. I've got an abandoned vehicle, Route 17, near mile marker 12. Unit 12's cruiser is on scene, but he's not. Possible foot pursuit into the woods, copy? Silence. Then whispers again. Help me. Don't follow. Already gone. I dropped the mic. It wasn't dispatch. It wasn't interference. I don't know what it was, but I knew I didn't want to hear it anymore. I climbed back up toward the cruiser, boots slipping in the mud. Rain slicked my uniform, made every breath feel heavy, and through it all, that radio kept whispering. Louder now, like it knew I was listening. When I reached the door, I froze again, because this time I understood one of the voices. It was him, Unit 12. Only, it wasn't his normal tone. It was strained, distant, like he was talking through water. Turn back, it said. I stood there gripping the door frame, not sure if I should pull the radio free or run back to my own car. Every nerve in me screamed to get away. But the training, the duty, that weight on my badge, it pushed me forward. I sat in his cruiser. The seat was soaked cold. The smell of wet vinyl and mud filled my nose. I grabbed the mic, clicked it, and for a second the whispers cut out. Then the radio erupted, his voice again. But this time, not words. It was screaming, raw, broken, pulled through 1,000 miles of static. I dropped the mic like it burned me. The scream kept going, pouring out of the speakers, then fracturing into laughter, then silence. The storm swallowed everything again. I sat there shaking, staring at the empty road ahead. That's when I noticed something in the mud just beyond the headlights. A shoe, caked in dirt, half buried by the rain. A man's boot. I got out, crouched to look closer, and my stomach twisted. Because I knew that boot, it was his, Unit 12's, but the laces were cut clean through and the inside was empty. I backed away, rain blinding me, light flashing against the trees. My pulse hammered in my ears. And then over the storm, I heard it. Not from the radio this time, from the woods, his voice again. My partner's voice, calling my name. Only this time it was close. So close I could almost feel the breath on my neck. They impounded the cruiser the next morning, I remember watching the tow truck drag it out of the lot, the red and blue lights still faintly pulsing behind the cracked glass of its bar. The storm had passed, leaving the whole town washed in gray. The air smelled like wet asphalt and pine. It should have felt like closure. Unit 12's cruiser, sealed, tagged, and hauled off for evidence. Something official, something solid. But I couldn't shake the sound of that radio, the whispers, the scream. His voice. They told me it was stress, storm interference, the mind filling in gaps. Dispatch even pulled the logs, said there was no record of my transmissions, nothing beyond static. But I know what I heard, and I wasn't done hearing it. That night, back at the station, the radio started again. At first, I thought I was imagining it, a faint hum under the normal chatter. But as the shifts rolled on, I noticed the pattern. Every time the room got quiet, when the calls slowed down, I'd catch it. A voice. His voice. Unit 14. Need backup? Always the same words. Always in that broken, drowning tone. The first time it happened, I froze with my pen halfway across the report. My chest tightened, the memory of rain and mud pressing down on me. I turned up the volume, waited. Silence. Then again, softer. Backup. Please. I slammed the dial off, heart racing, but the silence wasn't better. The silence made me feel like I'd left him out there, calling, and I'd just walked away. I told myself it had to be bleed through from another channel, some old recording caught in the storm. That's what the tech guys said when I asked. But the look they gave me, it wasn't convincing, because none of them had lost a partner in that rain. None of them had heard a scream pour out of a cruiser like that, and none of them had to drive home with a radio that wouldn't shut up. I keep mine on, always. It's habit. Comfort even. The low hum in the car makes the night shift less empty. But after that night, comfort turned into something else. Because when I pulled onto Route 7, just outside town, the static started again. The voice broke through like it was sitting in the seat next to me. Need backup? North Woods. Please. I almost drove off the road. I yanked the mic up, hand shaking, and answered before I could stop myself. Unit 12? Where are you? Static. Then, right here. I swear to you, I dropped that mic like it burned me. I couldn't breathe. My headlights cut across the trees, and for a split second, I thought I saw someone standing between the trunks. Just the outline. Just tall enough to be him. But when I blinked, it was gone. After that, the voice followed me everywhere. At the gas pump. At the diner. Even at home, when I left the radio on the counter just to prove I wasn't crazy. Always the same words, always his tone. But then, one night, it changed. I was finishing a call log in the patrol lot, rain ticking against the windshield. The radio crackled and I braced myself. But this time, it wasn't a call for backup. It was a whisper. Why didn't you help me? The pen fell out of my hand. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. And in that silence, the radio hissed again. Soft laughter, low and broken, like someone laughing through water. I shut the car off and sat in the dark, hands clamped tight on the wheel, listening to my own pulse. They told me not to talk about it. Said grief makes echoes. Said radios pick up strange things, but grief doesn't know your badge number. Grief doesn't whisper your name, and grief doesn't follow you into your own home. Because last week I came in after midnight, kicked off my boots, and dropped the radio on the counter. I left it off. No static, no voices, just silence. But then, from upstairs, in the room where I keep his old jacket on the back of the chair, I heard it. The hiss, the crackle. And then, Unit 14, need backup? I didn't go up. I couldn't. I sat on the bottom stair until the sun came through the blinds, listening to the sound of my dead partner calling me from the dark. And even now, sitting here, telling you this, the radio on my desk just clicked alive again. He's still asking for backup, and I don't know how much longer I can ignore him.